You want this job? Gideon Maddox said, and his voice was the kind that didn't need volume to carry. He looked her over once, the single suitcase, the broken zipper, the $86 she hadn't told anyone about, but somehow he seemed to already know. You walk through that door, girl, whatever happens, next is on you. Haley Monroe looked straight back at him. That's the kind of deal I'd take, she said. Before we go any further, if you've ever walked into a room where every single person wanted you to turn around and walk back out, and you didn't, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels, and stay with us. Every part of what Haley Monroe survived is worth hearing to the end. She had been driving for 11 hours when the gas gauge gave up pretending. Haley pulled off the highway at the first exit that had a sign Red Mesa. Population 4,200, elevation 3,800 feet, and coasted into a service station on fumes and muscle memory. The attendant was a teenager who didn't look up from his phone. She paid for gas with exact change, counted the remaining bills in her jacket pocket without taking them out, and stood beside the pump long enough to understand that she had nowhere to be except here. And here was nowhere she had planned to be. Red Mesa was not the kind of town that welcomed strangers. It was the kind of town that watched them. She felt the watching. Immediately, a woman in the doorway of the laundromat across the street, two men leaning against a truck in the hardware store parked, a child staring from a second-floor window with the serious face of someone who had been told not to trust new things. Haley was used to being watched. What she was not used to was having no answer when people asked her where she was going. 3 months earlier, she had known exactly where she was going. She had a job she was good at, a studio apartment with a working radiator, and a reputation at Carver's Kitchen that had taken 4 years to build. She could run a Friday night rush for 100 covers without losing her head. She could spot a bad health inspection before the inspector walked through the door. And she understood the difference between a kitchen that was cutting corners and a kitchen that was cutting corners in ways that would eventually hurt somebody. The problem was that her employer, Dennis Carver, had discovered the same thing she had, that she could spot it, and had decided the solution was not to stop hurting people, but to make sure the person who noticed stopped talking. It started small. He asked her to initial a vendor invoice she knew was altered. She didn't. He asked her to adjust the tip pool records to keep the numbers clean on paper. She refused. The third time he called her into his office, he didn't ask. He told her that her signature would be on the corrected payroll documents by Friday morning, or she could clear her locker. She cleared her locker. Within 2 weeks, she heard what he was saying about her around the industry, that she had been caught pocketing cash, that she had falsified her own hours, that the whole reason Carver's Kitchen was in financial hell was who'd been stealing from the register for 8 months. None of it was true. All of it was documented in ways that would take a lawyer to untangle. And she didn't have a lawyer. She had $86 and a suitcase with a broken zipper and a postcard she had read so many times the edges were soft. The postcard was from her sister Tessa. It had arrived 18 months ago, postmarked Red Mesa, handwritten in the fast, slanted script that Haley had been reading since she was 6 years old. There was no return address. There was no explanation. There were 6 words: if I vanish, ask at the last mile. Haley had tried. She had called the Red Mesa Sheriff's Office twice and been told her sister was an adult who had left voluntarily. She had filed a missing persons report with the state that went nowhere because there was no evidence of harm. She had called every restaurant and bar in town she could find listed online. And no one remembered a woman named Tessa Monroe. She had not been able to come in person. She had a job, a lease, a life that she was still holding together with both hands. And then she didn't have any of those things. And the only direction that felt like it meant something was 2 states west and 11 hours of highway. And so she drove. She checked into the Red Mesa Motor Court for $38 a night, the lowest rate they would give her, and told herself she would stay 1 week. By the end of the first hour, She understood why Tessa had sent that postcard instead of a phone number. The motel clerk's name was Pauline. She was somewhere in her 60s, with the kind of face that had been kind once and had gotten tired of it. She gave Haley a room key and a look that lasted 2 seconds longer than a room key required. And when Haley asked carefully, with the exact amount of casualness she had rehearsed, if she knew anything about a place called The Last Mile, Pauline put both hands flat on the counter. Why, she said. Not a question, a warning. I saw a sign, Haley said. Help wanted. Pauline exhaled through her nose. 4 people have taken that job in the past 2 months. 4. You know how many are still there? None, Haley guessed. None, Pauline confirmed. First one quit after 3 days. Said the place was haunted. Laughed about it when he first told me. Wasn't laughing by the end. She paused. Second one, young man. Very polite, said one of the men threatened him. Wouldn't say which one or what they said. Just packed up and drove out of here at 2 in the morning. She lowered her voice, even though they were alone. Third one was a woman. About your age, she lasted 11 days. Whatever she saw in there, she won't talk about it. She moved back to her sister's place in Flagstaff and won't pick up the phone when Red Mesa's area code calls. She looked at Haley. The fourth one told me he just walked in, looked around, and walked back out. Said he had a feeling. A feeling, Haley said. That's what he said. Haley nodded. She asked for directions. Pauline gave them slowly. The way people give directions to a place they hope you won't actually go. The Last Mile sat at the edge of town where the highway bent and the streetlights stopped pretending. Even before she saw the sign, she heard it. The low rumble of engines that had gone quiet right before she arrived, as if the building itself had taken a breath. The parking lot held more motorcycles than she could count in a quick glance, and she didn't try to count them. The windows were reinforced with wire mesh. There was a porch light that worked, but had no reason to be welcoming. And on the front door, taped at eye level, in handwriting that was large and unhurried, night bartender wanted cash paid weekly. She stood outside for 45 seconds. Not from fear, or not only from fear. She was reading the building the way she had learned to read kitchens, the things that were wrong on the surface, the things that were wrong underneath, and the difference between problems that were just neglect and problems that were deliberate. The tape holding the sign was fresh. Someone had replaced it recently. Someone wanted that sign to stay visible. She pushed open the door. The silence that followed was the kind that happens in rooms where conversation stops not because something interesting has entered, but because something potentially dangerous has entered, and no one wants to be the first to misread it. There were close to 40 people inside. Almost all of them were men. Almost all of them were wearing leather cuts with the same patch across the back, a design she recognized without needing to be told what it meant. Hell's Angels. The name wasn't something she was afraid of, the way civilians were afraid of it, with the movie poster version of fear that didn't know anything real. She had grown up around working-class men who didn't always live the way polite society preferred. She knew the difference between men who were dangerous because they were cruel and men who were dangerous because they had decided on their own terms for everything, including who they trusted and who they didn't. What she felt standing in that doorway was not fear. It was assessment. She was being assessed. And she was doing the same thing back. The man who stood up from the center of the room was not the largest man there, but he was the one everyone else was watching to see what he would do. He was somewhere north of 50, with a build that had been powerful for a long time and showed no particular interest in apologizing for it. His eyes were the particular shade of gray that is not warm and not cold, but simply fully present, taking in everything and giving nothing back for free. He walked toward her in no hurry. The room stayed quiet. You lost, he said. No, Haley said. I'm here about the sign. He glanced at the door and back at her. Sign's been up for 2 months. I know. 4 people already took a look and decided not to. I know that too. He studied her for a moment. Not threatening, assessing, the same way she was assessing him, which she had the feeling he also noticed. Gideon Maddox, he said. People call me Stone. Haley Monroe. You got bar experience. Haley Monroe? 4 years. Restaurant and bar both. I can run a service bar, a full bar, a station alone on a Friday night with 100 people. I know inventory. I know pour cost. I know how to read a room, and I know when something's wrong with a ledger. Something shifted in his expression. Not much. Stone was not a man whose face did much without permission, but something shifted. That last part, he said. Why include that? Because you've been losing money, Haley said. I can tell from the outside. A bar with 40 people in it on a Tuesday night shouldn't need to advertise that hard for a bartender unless something making every bartender leave or something's making the owner nervous about who stays. The room was very quiet. Stone looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Come in, then." He set 3 conditions. He told her, sitting across from him at a corner table, while the rest of the room slowly resumed its conversations. Not loud, but resumed enough to give them a ring of privacy without the pretense of being alone. You respect everyone in this room, he said. Not because you agree with everything you see, because this is their home and you're a guest until proven otherwise. That's fair, she said. You don't touch anything behind the restricted section. The office, the back storage room, anything that has a lock and a sign that says private, you walk past it. Understood? And anything that feels wrong, not just illegal, not just dangerous, anything that feels wrong to you, you come to me first. Not the police, not the county, not whatever reporter you might think would want to hear about it. Me. Haley considered that for 2 seconds. If something feels wrong to me about you, that deal falls apart. Stone almost smiled. Then you're smarter than the last 4. He pushed back his chair. You start tonight, trial run. You work until close. We pay you for the night, regardless of what we decide. Cole will watch you. Watch me. Watch out for you, Stone said. There's a difference. You'll figure out which one he means. Cole Barrett was sitting at the far end of the bar when Stone brought her over, and he did not stand up. He was somewhere in his late 30s, with the particular kind of stillness that is not unfriendly, but is not open, the stillness of a man who has learned to spend a long time watching things before he says anything about them. He had a road captain's patch in the hands of someone who worked with them. He looked at her once, fully, and then back at his drink. Cole, Stone said. This is Haley Monroe. She's on trial tonight. Cole said nothing. He lifted his chin slightly, which might have been acknowledgement, or might have been that he was watching something past her shoulder that was more interesting. That mean he's watching me? Haley asked Stone. Means he's responsible if something goes wrong, Stone said. He takes that seriously. Cole still didn't look at her. Bars set up the same way it's been for 6 years, he said. Speed rails on the left. Glasses are on the right. Register code is 6472. Regulars know their tabs. Don't ask them, they'll tell you. Thank you, Haley said. He picked up his drink. That was the end of it. She went behind the bar. By the end of the first hour, she understood why 4 people had quit. It was not the men. The men were fine, not warm, not welcoming, but they were paying customers who knew what they wanted and said it without wasting anyone's time, and she had worked rooms far more difficult than this one. It wasn't the silence or the weight of the leather or the way they watched her. She had expected that, and she was managing it. What she hadn't expected was the back room. She noticed it the way she noticed everything in a new bar, by moving, by working, by keeping her hands busy and her eyes open and her mouth doing the job so her mind could do the other one. The smell came first. Not smoke, not mildew, not the sourness of a drain that needed attention, something electrical, sharp and faint and intermittent, which was the kind of smell that was worse than continuous, because intermittent meant it was building up to something. She was pulling a bottle of Jim Beam from the second to bottom shelf when she saw the invoices. She wasn't looking for them. They were in a folder on the shelf below the rail, which was not where invoices belonged. Invoices belonged in an office, and the folder was creased as if someone had grabbed it repeatedly from the same place and shoved it back the same way. She wouldn't have thought about it except that the folder was open at the edge, and the top sheet was visible, and the total on the top sheet was $460 for a liquor delivery. She knew what that delivery was worth. She could see the bottles on the shelf. It wasn't $460. She finished the pour, handed the drink across the bar, and waited. Then she picked up the folder and looked at the next invoice, and the next. She was careful about her face. She had learned young how to keep a face neutral when something was wrong, because showing what you knew before you knew how much danger the knowing was in was the most expensive mistake a person could make. The invoices were duplicated. Some of them were duplicated and charged differently. Some of them were for deliveries she could see had not arrived because the shelf space was there and the bottles weren't. She put the folder back exactly where she found it. Then she started counting. She didn't use paper. She ran the numbers in her head the way she'd been running numbers in her head since she was 14 and doing her mother's household budget while her mother was in the hospital. When you grow up learning that numbers are the thing standing between your family and the power company shutting off the heat, you learn to do them accurately. By the time she had worked through the register totals against what she could verify from the obvious inventory, she was short by a number that was not small. She looked at Cole Barrett at the end of the bar. He was watching her. Had been watching her the whole time, she realized. He just hadn't been obvious about it. She held eye contact for 1 second, then turned back to her work. Around 11 o'clock, a man she hadn't spoken to came up to the service end of the bar and set an empty glass down too hard. He was younger than most of the room, mid-30s, close-shaved, with a bar manager's energy that she recognized from experience. The person who owns the system, not the building, and knows the difference matters. "You're stacking the glasses wrong," he said. Haley looked at the glasses. "They're clean and they're upright. They go lip down in this bar. Lip down collects water and holds bacteria," she said. "Lip up with a drip mat is cleaner." He stared at her. "And you know better than how we've been running this bar for 8 years. I know what the health standard is," she said. "If you want me to stack them lip down, I'll stack them lip down. I was just explaining what I was doing." A long pause. "Nolan Price," he said. "I manage operations here." "Haley Monroe," she said. "I'm on trial tonight." "Yeah," Nolan said. "I know." He picked up the glass. He walked away. She watched him go. She watched which way he went when he left the main room. He went toward the back hallway. Just before midnight, she found the timer. She was reorganizing the lower shelf where the folder had been, not investigating, just cleaning, because cleaning was the most natural way to look at things without looking like you were looking. And she moved a stack of bar towels that were folded wrong, too tight, with a flatness to the bottom of the stack that didn't come from towels. She lifted the towels. The electrical timer was old, the kind with a manual dial, the kind that hardware stores stopped stocking 20 years ago. It was connected to a wire that ran toward the back wall. It was set. The dial indicated it would trigger in less than 40 minutes. She replaced the towels exactly the way she'd found them. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was steady. Inside, something cold and clear had taken over, the part of her that might have panicked. And she had learned long ago to trust that cold and clear feeling more than almost anything else about herself. She looked up. Cole Barrett was not at the end of the bar. She scanned the room. He was near the back, talking to an older man. Stone was visible near the front. Nolan Price was nowhere she could see. She reached under the bar and found the ledger where the night's totals were being tracked. She found the small security drive that was mounted to the underside of the cabinet, the kind of thing you miss if you're not looking for it. She slid both items into the back waistband of her jeans with the calm efficiency of someone putting tools away. Then she walked to the intercom behind the bar that was connected to the back office, keyed it, and held it down long enough to send static through the whole room. Every head turned. "There's a problem with the electrical system," she said. "Everybody needs to head toward the kitchen right now." Nobody moved. She put the same voice into it that she had used on 100 panicking Friday nights when the printer jammed and the wait went to 90 minutes and the host was crying in the walk-in. The voice that did not ask. "I said now," she said. "Get up." Stone was at the bar in 4 steps. "What's happening?" "Someone set a timer in the lower shelf," she said. "It's connected to wiring that runs toward the storeroom." We have less than 40 minutes, but I'm not willing to bet what's in that storeroom. His eyes went flat and still. Not panic, calculation. You're sure? I'm sure about the timer. I'm sure about the wiring. What I'm not sure about is what's on the other end. And I'd rather evacuate 40 people for a false alarm than find out I was right after the fact. She held his eyes. Your call. Stone turned to the room. Kitchen exit, he said. 2 words. The room moved. She had expected it to take longer, had worked in restaurants, where getting 40 people to move in an emergency meant fighting through arguments about check coats and unfinished drinks. The Hells Angels moved like they had drilled for exactly this, which perhaps they had. The tables cleared in under 90 seconds. She went back for the older man near the restrooms. His name was Amos. She didn't know that yet. He was down near the hallway, moving slowly, a hand against the wall, and she got to him just as the first trace of smoke reached the main room, not heavy, not choking yet, but present, and she knew what that meant about what was happening in the storeroom. She got her arm under his and walked him toward the kitchen. The front door wouldn't open. She did not waste time on the front door. She turned toward the kitchen exit, where she could hear Cole's voice on the other side, and she kept moving. Cole hit the rear door from the outside with something heavy once, twice, and then it gave. Cold desert air came through. She walked Amos through it. Others streamed past her. She was the last person out. She stood in the parking lot and counted heads the way she always counted heads after a restaurant emergency, the fast automatic count that tells you, before anyone says anything, whether the number is right. She counted until she stopped. Then she stopped. Everyone was out. Behind her, through the walls she could no longer enter, she heard the storeroom take the fire into itself, like a held breath finally released. Stone came to stand beside her in the parking lot, while sirens built in the distance. He didn't say anything. He was looking at the building, calculating something she wasn't privy to, and she let him calculate. She was doing her own. You grab the ledger, he said. And the security drive, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Why? Because if someone set that timer, they wanted more than the building. They wanted the records gone too. She paused. Same reason they set it while the bar was full. It was supposed to look like an accident that took the records with it. Cole came around from the far side of the building. He looked at her fully, this time without the sideways attention he'd been paying her all night. You set the fire, he said. No, she said. I have to ask. I know, she said. Ask anything you need to. He looked at her for a long moment. He nodded once. 2 points of origin, he said quietly. Front and back. He was looking at Stone. She's right. This wasn't electrical. Stone's face did something complicated and contained itself again. He turned and looked at the people standing in the parking lot, 40 men, some of them already on their phones, some standing in the particular posture of people deciding what to do with controlled anger. Then he looked back at Haley. Where'd you learn to read a bar that fast, he said. From a kitchen that was trying to hide what it was doing, she said. I've been in that situation before. I know what it looks like. He was quiet for another moment. You saved everyone in that building tonight. I spotted the timer, she said. Everyone in that building got themselves out. The distinction mattered to her. He seemed to understand that it did. The fire trucks arrived. The night became noise and light and controlled chaos. And Haley Monroe, 27 years old, $86 to her name, stood in a parking lot in Red Mesa, Arizona, holding a bar ledger and a security drive and the first piece of evidence she had found in 18 months that pointed toward her missing sister. She did not tell Stone that part yet. She needed to understand what she was holding before she handed it to anyone else. Dawn came slowly over the desert. The way dawn comes when no one has slept, not as a surprise, but as a conclusion to a long and lightless thing. The fire investigators arrived while it was still dark and left before it was fully light. The storeroom was destroyed. The bar itself had held, mostly, which was either luck or the construction of men who had built things to survive being tested. Stone called her over when the last official vehicle had cleared the lot. You need somewhere to stay, he said. I have a motel room. You have a room at the Red Mesa Motor Court. That Pauline Waters is going to charge you double for the moment she hears about tonight. He wasn't wrong. There's an apartment upstairs. It's been empty. If you want it, it's yours. Week by week, we work out the arrangement. She looked at him. I want to see the books, she said, a pause. The books. If I'm going to work here, and I don't know yet if I am, I want to see what I'm walking into. Full access to the business accounts, not the club's finances, the bar's finances. Stone studied her for a long time with those gray eyes that gave nothing away for free. You'll find things you don't like, he said. I know, she said. The last person who started looking into things we don't like disappeared, he said. Very quiet, very level. Something went through her that was not quite fear and not quite recognition. It landed somewhere between the two. What was her name? Haley said. Stone said nothing for a long moment. Tessa, he said. Her name was Tessa. She worked here for about 7 weeks. The desert air between them went very still. Haley looked at him and did not let her face do anything it couldn't afford to do right now. When did she leave, she said. About 18 months ago, Stone said. Said she was moving on. Took her things. Didn't leave a note. Haley looked out at the parking lot. The motorcycles were still there, all of them, lined up in the early gray light like a fact that was not going anywhere. I'll take the job, she said. She said it quietly. She said it the way a person says something they have already decided before anyone asked. Stone nodded once. Rooms upstairs. Keys on the hook by the kitchen door. She picked up her suitcase. She walked toward the building. She had come to Red Mesa, looking for her sister and a night's wages. What she had found in the first 8 hours was a building someone wanted burned to the ground, a set of books someone had been emptying for months, and confirmation that Tessa had been here, had worked this bar, had looked at these same numbers, had come to the same conclusions, and had vanished. She was not going to vanish. She climbed the stairs and did not look back. The apartment upstairs smelled like nobody had opened a window in 6 months. Haley didn't open one either. She sat on the edge of the bare mattress in her jacket and her boots, and she held the ledger in her lap, and she did not sleep. She read. She had worked in 4 different food and beverage operations across 6 years, and the one thing every dishonest employer had in common was that they were not as clever as they believed. Carver had hidden his theft in overtime adjustments. The catering company she'd worked for at 22 had buried it in supplier rebates that never appeared in the actual bank account. Dishonesty had patterns the same way honesty had patterns. And the pattern she was reading now in the last mile's ledger was old and practiced and would have been invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it. Someone was creating vendor invoices that didn't match real deliveries. The amounts were not large individually, 140 here, 260 there, but they were consistent, going back as far as the ledger recorded. And the entries were always recorded by the same hand. She could tell by the pen pressure and the particular way the number 4 was written. With the crossbar too high, the way certain people write when they learned from someone who wrote it that way first. She set the ledger down at 3 in the morning and lay back on the mattress without taking her jacket off. She was thinking about Tessa. Tessa Monroe was 31 years old, or she had been 31 years old 18 months ago, which made her 32 now if she was somewhere making birthdays. She was 5'4", and she had their mother's laugh, and she had never in her life been able to leave a wrong thing alone. That was the word their grandmother had used, stubborn. The word their mother had used was principled, which was a kinder word for the same quality, and the word Haley had always used privately, talking to herself in the car or in the shower, was brave because it took a particular kind of courage to look at something wrong and keep looking when looking was exactly what got people hurt. Tessa had found the same thing Haley was finding right now. 7 weeks in, she had found it, and then she had sent a postcard, and then she had been gone. Haley stared at the ceiling. She was not going to disappear. She was behind the bar by 9 the next morning. Stone was already in the building, in the office, with the door half open, and she could hear him on the phone, the careful, controlled voice of a man managing a situation he hadn't created and resented having to manage. Cole was at the bar with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He looked like he also hadn't slept. "You're still here," he said when she came in. "I told you I would be." People say a lot of things at 4 in the morning that they reconsider by daylight. "I'm not people," she said. She went behind the bar and started the coffee maker and began checking the day inventory against what she'd memorized from the night before. "The storeroom fire started in 2 places," she said without looking up. "I noticed it when the smoke was coming through. Front corner and back wall. If it was electrical, it would have been one origin point." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Fire investigators said the same thing this morning. Gave Stone his preliminary report an hour ago." "What does Stone think?" "Stone thinks carefully before he says what he thinks." She looked up. "And you?" Cole turned his coffee cup a quarter turn on the bar. "I think someone has been wanting us off this property for a long time and decided to move from threatening to doing." "Grant Mercer," she said. The air changed slightly. Cole's eyes sharpened. "Where'd you hear that name?" he said. "I didn't hear it anywhere," she said. "It's on 2 of the vendor invoices in that folder on the shelf below the rail. The invoices are for a supply company called Mesa West Distribution. Mesa West Distribution's filing address is a commercial mail drop. The same mail drop is listed on a business registration I found when I searched the address. The registration is for a property acquisition company called Mercer Land Holdings." Silence. Cole put down his coffee cup. "You found all of that last night," he said. "Before the fire," she said. "While I was cleaning." He looked at her for a long moment with the expression of a man recalculating something significant. "You didn't say anything." "I was on trial," she said. "I needed to understand what I was looking at before I said anything to anyone. And then the fire happened." She set down the inventory sheet. "Cole, someone set that fire while 40 people were inside. That's not a business dispute. That's a message that the other option is available if the business dispute doesn't go the right way." "We know that," Cole said. "Do you know who inside this building is feeding Mercer information about when the bar is full enough to make the message worth sending?" Silence again. Longer this time. Cole stood up from the bar stool. He walked toward the office and stopped in the doorway. "Stone," he said, "you need to hear this." Stone listened without interrupting, which was a quality Haley had learned to respect in the same way she respected people who could be still in a crisis. He sat at his desk and he let her talk. And when she finished, he folded his hands on the desk and looked at them for a moment. "You're telling me the vendor fraud and the fire are connected," he said. "I'm telling you the vendor fraud runs through a shell company connected to Mercer. And the fire was set when the bar was at its fullest on a weeknight. Both of those things benefit the same person." She paused. "I'm also telling you that Tessa Monroe found the same thing." This was the moment she had been deciding about all night. She watched his face. Stone's expression did not change exactly, but something shifted behind it, not guilt, but awareness. The awareness of a man who has been carrying a piece of information and just understood that the person across from him also has it and has had it longer than he realized. "You know who she is," he said. "She's my sister," Haley said. The office was very quiet. "You didn't come here about the job," Stone said. "I came here about both," she said. "The job is real. The money is real. I have $86 and my reputation was destroyed by someone who is connected to the same man trying to take your bar. But yes, I came here because of the postcard Tessa sent me before she disappeared." Stone looked at Cole. Cole's face had the expression of a man who has just understood a sequence of events he had been puzzling over and finds on some the answer both clarifying and complicated. "She's alive," Stone said. "As far as I know, Tessa Monroe is alive. She left voluntarily. She told me she needed to go because staying was dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "She said she'd found something and she'd told someone inside this club about it and she wasn't sure anymore whether that was a mistake." He met Haley's eyes. "She wouldn't tell me who she'd told. She was scared. I don't think she trusted me." "Did she have reason not to?" "No," Stone said. "But a frightened person doesn't always operate on reason." Haley sat with that for a moment. She told someone inside the club, and then she was frightened enough to run. Which means whoever she told is connected to the fraud. Or she thought they were, Cole said. Or they were, she said back. There's a difference. She spent the next 3 days rebuilding what the smoke had damaged. This was not a metaphor. The bar itself had survived the fire, but the back hallway, the storage arrangement, and the whole network of what went where and why had been in the storeroom, and the storeroom was gone. She worked with her hands and she asked questions, constantly not about the club's business, not about the fraud, but about the bar's operations. About which regulars drank what, about the delivery schedule, and the supplier relationships and the staffing hours. She made mistakes. She misjudged a tab on the second night and had to go back and correct it, which she did openly and without making it anyone else's problem. She accused the wrong man of moving the supply inventory she'd organized. It was Amos, the older man she'd helped out of the building, who had reorganized it according to a system 20 years older than hers and perfectly logical once he explained it. She apologized to Amos directly, and he looked at her with a surprised respect, the kind that comes when an apology arrives, without qualifications attached. Cole watched all of this. He didn't comment on most of it. But on the fourth morning, when she was working through the inventory records she'd reconstructed from memory and what she could piece together from the damaged files, he sat down on the other side of the bar and said, "You want to know about the fund?" She looked up. "What fund?" "The one Tessa was investigating when she left." She set down her pen. "Tell me." "The club runs charitable collections," Cole said. "Has for years. Money goes to injured riders, veterans in the area who need it, emergency funds for people in town who are in a bad spot. It's not a 501c3. It's not formalized. It's what we do because it's what we do." He stopped. About 2 years ago, the amounts started not adding up. What came in and what went out had a gap that shouldn't have been there. Not huge. A few hundred here and there, then more. "Who managed the collections?" Cole looked at her. "Nolan Price," she said. "He didn't manage them. He tracked them. Handled the accounting side." "Same thing," she said. "Did you know?" "I suspected," he said. Tessa confirmed it. And then Tessa was gone, and the only record she had of what she'd found went with her. He stopped again. "I should have pushed harder after she left. I didn't. A friend paid for something I didn't act on once before, and I thought I'd learned from it, and then I made the same mistake." It was the most personal thing he had said to her. She understood that he wasn't telling her for sympathy. He was telling her because he was holding himself accountable, out loud, and he had chosen to do it in front of her, specifically, which was its own kind of trust. "Tessa didn't just find the vendor fraud," Haley said. "She found the charitable fund theft, too." "Yes," and she told someone. And then she was scared. "Nolan," she said. "Probably Nolan," Cole said. "But probably isn't proof." "No," she said. "It's not." She picked up her pen again. "Give me a week." On the 6th day, Grant Mercer came to the bar in person. She heard about it secondhand. She was doing a cash count in the back when it happened. But she heard it clearly through the half-open door. The voice of a man who was accustomed to rooms accommodating themselves to his presence. He was well-dressed in the way developers were well-dressed, which was to say expensively but without warmth. And he spoke to Stone in the tone of a man extending a courtesy before a consequence. "The property appraisal came in," Mercer said. "I'm prepared to make a final offer. Above market. You could walk away from all of this clean." "I'm not interested in walking away," Stone said. "The county has been made aware of certain code violations on the property. The fire investigation is ongoing. There's a pattern here, Maddox. That doesn't look good for you or for your people. And I'm trying to give you a dignified exit before it gets worse." "I appreciate your concerns," Stone said. And he said it without a single word of appreciation in it. Mercer was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "The next thing that happens won't be a fire you can walk away from." She heard the door open and close. She heard Stone's footsteps move to the bar, slow and deliberate. She came out of the back. Stone looked at her. "You heard?" "Yes. He's not going to wait much longer." "Then we don't have much time," she said. "I need access to the full business accounts, not just the ledger. The actual bank statements, the tax filings, whatever digital records survived." Stone looked at her for a moment. If you find what I think you're going to find, then we'll deal with what it means together, she said. But I need to find it first. He went into the office and came back with a folder and a laptop and a series of passwords written on a piece of paper in his deliberate handwriting. He set them on the bar in front of her. Nobody touches those except you and me, he said. And Cole, she said. Stone glanced toward the door. And Cole. What she found in the next 48 hours was not one thing. It was a system. The vendor invoices were the visible layer, the part you'd find if you were looking. But underneath the vendor invoices was a pattern of transfers that moved money in amounts just under the reporting threshold into accounts held by 3 separate LLCs, none of which had a physical address that matched anything real. She traced 2 of the LLCs back to the same formation agent. The third one took longer because it was built better, newer, cleaner, with a registered agent in Nevada, and no obvious connection to anything in Red Mesa. She found the connection at 2 in the morning on the 7th day, drinking cold coffee at the bar, with the laptop and 3 years of bank statements spread between them. And it was Cole who found it. Actually, he had been sitting with her for the last 4 hours, without talking much, checking figures when she asked, holding a flashlight when the bar's under-counter lighting wasn't enough. This account, he said. He pointed to a line item. This is the same number as the Mesa West distribution account. The last 4 digits, she looked. He was right. The third LLC was not separate. It was the same operation, reorganized under a new name after the first one had gotten too much movement on it. And the formation date of the new LLC was 11 days after Tessa Monroe had stopped showing up for work. 11 days. She sat very still. He knew, she said. When Tessa started asking questions, Nolan told Mercer. And Mercer restructured the accounts to cover the trail before anyone could document it. She looked at Cole. Tessa didn't just find the fraud. She almost stopped it, and she got pushed out before she could. Cole looked at the screen for a moment. Then he looked at her. Your restaurant, he said. Carver's Kitchen. She looked at him. The accounting company Carver used, Cole said. You ever look into it? She felt something cold move through her. I never had reason to, she said slowly. Look it up, he said. She looked it up. The accounting company that had handled Dennis Carver's books, the same company that had enabled the payroll fraud she'd refused to sign off on, the same company that had helped Carver destroy her professional reputation, was registered to a holding company in Phoenix. The holding company in Phoenix had 2 principals. One of them was Grant Mercer. The room tilted. Not physically, she was sitting still, but the whole architecture of the last 3 months reorganized itself around a new center of gravity, and when it settled, she understood something she hadn't understood before. Her destroyed career had not been bad luck and a vindictive employer. Her destroyed career had been collateral damage from something much larger, and the reason she had been left without a reference or a reputation or $87 was because she had stumbled into the edge of the same network she had driven 11 hours to find. She had not found Red Mesa by accident. Red Mesa had been connected to her all along. Cole was watching her face. You okay, I will be, she said. In about 30 seconds, she breathed. Mercer used Carver to make sure I couldn't come after anyone legally. No job, no money, no credibility. If I'd tried to report what I saw at Carver's Kitchen, nobody would have listened, Cole said. Nobody did listen, she said. I tried. She looked at the screen again. He does this. He finds people who are close to something he wants to hide, and he removes them. Tessa, me, anyone who looks at the right numbers. She closed the laptop. He made a mistake leaving me with enough to drive across 2 states and keep looking. Cole looked at her for a long moment. It was the way he looked at things when he was deciding something, not checking, not assessing, but deciding. The way a person looks when they have been cautious for so long that trust has become a deliberate act rather than a natural one. What do we do with what we have, he said. We need Nolan's records, she said. Whatever he's been keeping for himself. A man running a scheme this long keeps records because he needs to know what he can't let go missing. They're somewhere in this building. The restricted section, Cole said. She said nothing. Haley, I know, she said. I'm not going in there. I'm telling you what needs to happen. A long pause. I'll talk to Stone. Cole said. It was Cole who told her later about the army contractor. They were in the bar after closing, putting chairs up, doing the small physical work that makes long conversations easier because your hands have somewhere to go. He told it without self-pity and without the kind of dramatic pause that people use when they want credit for honesty. He just told it like it happened. He had been 26 and serving as a road security advisor for a private logistics operation in a forward area he was not supposed to name. He noticed that the contractor's supply manifests were off quantities that didn't match, deliveries that were logged but hadn't arrived. He told his superior. His superior told him to focus on his own responsibilities. He focused on his own responsibilities. 3 weeks later, a convoy that was supposed to have replacement parts for its equipment didn't have them because the replacement parts had been logged as delivered and sold off by the contractor instead. The convoy broke down. One of the men in it was his closest friend. The friend did not die, but he lost 2 fingers and a year of his life recovering. And Cole had spent every day since then understanding exactly what it cost to see something wrong and decide it wasn't his place to push. That's why you watch everything, Haley said. That's why I don't trust easily, he said. And why I've been hard on the people who do. She looked at him sideways. You haven't been hard on me. I've been watching you hard, he said. That's different. She almost smiled. It was the first thing approaching a smile she had managed in a week. You watch different than you think you do, she said. Meaning what? Meaning you're not as invisible as you believe you are. She stacked 2 chairs. I knew you were watching me from the first hour. I didn't mind. I would have watched too. He was quiet for a moment. You don't say much about yourself, he said. I'm saying plenty right now. You know what I mean. She did. She set down the chair she was carrying and considered the question, not performing consideration, but actually doing it, which was a distinction she valued in herself. I stopped trusting people the way I used to after Carver, she said. But I think it started before that. When Tessa left the first time, she moved for a job in Arizona 4 years ago, and I thought she'd come back. She didn't, not really. And then the postcard came, and I didn't know if she was coming back at all. She paused. It's hard to keep trusting a world that keeps taking people out of it. Cole said nothing for a moment. Then she's out there, Haley. I know, she said. I just have to find what she found and finish what she started. And then maybe she can come back. She picked up the chairs again. The bar was quiet around them, the kind of quiet that a place gets after a long day that held more than it expected to. Through the walls, she could hear a motorcycle start somewhere in the parking lot, idle, and pull away, the sound of the world continuing, indifferent to the fact that 2 people by a bar in the desert had just told each other true things. On the 9th day, a veteran named Gerald Broom came to the bar in the afternoon and asked to speak with Stone. Stone wasn't in. Gerald sat at the bar and drank water and told Haley, unprompted, that he had donated $320 to the club's veteran fund 6 months ago because his neighbor's son had needed help with medical transport after an accident, and the money had never arrived. He wasn't angry. He was the particular kind of exhausted that comes after trying to be angry for long enough that the anger gave out. I figured it was just lost in the paperwork, Gerald said. I didn't want to make trouble. You're not making trouble, Haley said. Can you tell me the date you donated? He told her. She found the date in the collection records. The donation was logged. The disbursement was not. She looked at Gerald. She looked at the record. She said, Gerald, I'm going to need you to write down for me, in your own words, everything you remember about that donation. The date, the amount, who you gave it to, and what you were told it was for. He looked at her with the uncertain expression of a man who has been around long enough to know that when someone asks you to write things down, it means something is wrong enough to need a record. Is this going to cause problems? He said. For some people, she said, not for you. He wrote it down. He was the first. By the following afternoon, after word spread in the particular invisible way that word spreads in small towns, where everyone already knows the subtext of every conversation, she had statements from 4 more people. Different amounts, different dates, same pattern. Money donated, money logged, money never delivered. She put the statements in the ledger folder with the other records. She had not found Nolan's private records yet. She had not found the evidence that would tie the whole structure together in a way a court would use. But she had something Tessa hadn't managed to secure. Before she ran, she had witnesses. Real ones, with names and dates and amounts. People who were tired of being afraid to make trouble. On the 10th day, Nolan came in for his regular shift and looked at her across the bar with the particular expression of a man who has been watching someone else's confidence grow and has started to understand what that might mean for him. "You've been busy," he said. "Just doing my job," she said. He watched her for a moment. "You know, the last bartender who got too interested in things that weren't her business ended up having to leave in a hurry." She held his eyes. "I heard she made it out safe," she said. "That's what matters." He didn't respond. He went to the back. She turned to the bar and wiped it down with steady hands and did not let herself feel the fear until she was alone. And then she felt it fully, standing in the back hallway with her back against the wall, letting it move through her without letting it stop her. Fear was information. It was telling her that she was right about Nolan, and that Nolan knew it, and that the time between now and the moment he decided to do something about it was not long. She took out the security drive and looked at it. What was on it from the night of the fire was partial. The camera system had been damaged enough that the footage was incomplete. But incomplete was not empty. And incomplete, she had learned, was sometimes exactly enough. She put the drive back in her pocket. She went back to work. That night around 11, Amos sat at the bar longer than usual after most of the others had gone. He was a man of 60-something who had been riding with the club for longer than Haley had been alive, with the comfortable silence of someone who had made peace with himself and mostly to drink good whiskey and be left alone to do it. But tonight he looked at her for a while, and then he said, "You're not just here for a job." "No," she said. "You're here for her," he said. "The other one. The one who asked too many questions." She looked at him carefully. "You knew Tessa?" "Knew her enough," Amos said. "She was smart. Smarter than she was careful, which is a hard combination to survive in a place where someone with money wants you quiet." He turned his glass. "She left because she was afraid. Not of us, she knew we weren't the problem. She was afraid of what would happen to you if she didn't run." Haley went very still. "She knew about me," she said. "She talked about you all the time," Amos said. "Said if anything happened to her, her sister would come looking. Said she'd to make sure that when you came, whatever she'd found was still findable." He looked at her over his glass. "You found it yet?" "Most of it," she said quietly. Amos nodded slowly. "Then finish it," he said. "She's been waiting long enough to come home." He finished his drink and put the glass down and walked out, and Haley watched him go and stood very still behind the bar of the last mile while the gravity of what she was carrying settled into her like something that had always been true and had just now found its full weight. Her sister had stayed gone to protect her. Tessa had run not because she was beaten. She had run because she was buying time. Time for Haley to arrive. She slept 4 hours and woke up already thinking. That was how she knew she was close. When the problem followed her into sleep and was waiting on the other side of it, patient and specific, not the vague dread of not knowing, but the sharp discomfort of knowing enough to understand exactly what was still missing. She lay on the mattress in the upstairs apartment with the ceiling above her, and the bar's night sounds coming up through the floor, the creak of the building settling, the distant sound of a truck on the highway, and she thought about Nolan Price. He had been here 8 years. Stone had trusted him with operations because Stone trusted people who showed up consistently and did the work and didn't make noise. And Nolan had done all 3 of those things while doing a 4th thing that nobody had been in a position to document. 8 years was long enough to be invisible, long enough to build a system so integrated into the bar's normal life that pulling it out would feel like pulling a load-bearing wall. Everything that was real would shift along with everything that was false. That was the point. That had always been the point. She got up at 5 and went downstairs. Cole was already there. He was at the end of the bar with a yellow legal pad and a pen, and when she came in, he looked up without surprise, as if he had been expecting her arrival at approximately this hour. I couldn't sleep either, he said. What are you working on? Timeline, he said. He turned the pad toward her. He had been constructing a chronology, dates from the bank records, dates from the vendor invoices, dates from the collection fund logs, dates from employment records. He had written it out by hand in the neat, compressed handwriting of someone trained to document things accurately under conditions where accuracy cost something. She looked at it for a long moment. Nolan restructured the accounts 11 days after Tessa left, she said. Yes. But the vendor fraud starts 2 years before that. Yes. So Mercer was running this before Nolan was fully involved. Nolan didn't build the system. He inherited it and improved it. She traced a line on the pad with her finger, without touching it, which means there's someone else. Someone who set this up before Nolan was in a position to run it. Cole looked at the timeline. Or Nolan built it from the beginning and Mercer found him later. Either way, she said, Nolan is the one with the active records. He's been managing this for at least 2 years, which means he has documentation not because he's honest, but because anyone running a scheme this long needs to know what they've moved and where, so they can manage the exposure. He won't have it here, Cole said. Maybe not in the main bar, she said, but he's here every day, 12-hour shifts minimum. A man who needs to check his own records regularly isn't keeping them at a secondary location if he can avoid it. She looked toward the back hallway. It's in the restricted section. Stone won't like that. Stone wants the truth more than he wants the rules to stay comfortable, she said. That's my read on him. Tell me if I'm wrong. Cole thought about it. You're not wrong, he said. But he'll need to be the one to open it. She nodded. Then let's wait for him to get here. Stone arrived at 7:30. He listened to Haley's summary without sitting down, standing at the bar with his arms crossed. And when she finished, he was quiet for a moment that was longer than it felt. You're asking me to search my own operations manager, he said. I'm asking you to look at your own property, she said. Anything Nolan put in that restricted section is on your premises under your authority. You don't need his permission. He's been with this club for 8 years. I know that. If you're wrong, I'll take the responsibility, she said. I'm the one making the accusation. You're the one with the right to verify it. Stone looked at Cole. Cole looked back at him with the particular expression of a man who has already decided and is giving his president the space to arrive at the same place independently. Stone uncrossed his arms. All right, he said. Show me. The restricted section was 2 rooms, the office, which she'd been given limited access to already, and a secondary storage room that was kept separate from the main storeroom that had burned. Nolan had a key to the secondary storage room. So did Stone. The room was used for club documents, membership records, old financial filings, items that were private to the organization rather than the business. Stone opened it. The first thing Haley looked for was not a hiding place. It was the ordinary, the regular files, the things that were supposed to be there, the visible record of what the room was officially for. She went through it the way she went through new inventory, systematically, without rushing, without letting the urgency she felt in her chest push her hands faster than her eyes could track. She found it in 20 minutes. It was behind a metal filing cabinet that had been pushed against the back wall, not hidden cleverly, just placed in a position that would require effort to access, which for most people was enough. A fireproof document pouch, the kind people buy when they want to protect things from exactly the kind of fire that had just happened to this building. She looked at Stone before she touched it. Open it, he said. She opened it. Inside were printed bank statements for 3 accounts she hadn't seen before, not the LLCs she'd traced through the vendor invoices, but older accounts predating even the earliest fraud entries in the ledger. And there were printed email chains, the kind of communication that only gets printed by someone who wants a physical record they can deny or deploy depending on how circumstances develop. The emails were between an address she didn't recognize and a domain name that resolved to a property management company she could look up. She looked at the property management company's name. She looked at Cole. He was reading the same line. "That's one of Mercer's," he said. "Yes," she said. "And the date on the first email is 3 months before Nolan took the operation manager position here." Stone took the papers from her hands. He read for a full minute without speaking. His face did nothing visible, which was the most telling thing it could have done, because Haley had learned in 2 weeks that Stone's face was only fully still when what he was reading was worse than what he had prepared himself for. "He was already Mercer's before he came here," Stone said. "He was placed here," she said. "The whole operations manager position, Mercer probably created the conditions that made it necessary. Made Stone feel like the club needed proper business management. Put his man in to run it." Stone set the papers down. He put both hands flat on the filing cabinet. He breathed once, deliberately through his nose. 8 years, he said. Neither Haley nor Cole said anything. Some things needed a moment of uninterrupted space. "We secure this," Stone said. His voice had gone flat in a way that was not anger, but was the thing that comes after anger in a man who has been disciplined too long to let anger make decisions for him. "Everything. The pouch, the records you found in the bar, the statements. We photograph everything in place before we move it. And nobody says a word to anyone until I say so." "Nolan's going to know something changed," Cole said. "He watches this place as carefully as anyone." "Yes," Stone said. "He will." He picked up the document pouch. "Which means we have maybe 24 hours before he does something about it." She was wrong about the 24 hours. They had 9. She was behind the bar at 6 that evening when Nolan came in 2 hours before his shift was scheduled to start. She knew before he opened his mouth. It was the quality of his arrival too purposeful, too arranged, the specific energy of a man who has decided to do something he practiced in the car on the way over. She kept her hands moving. She did not look up any more than she normally would. He walked straight to Stone's table. He sat down without being invited. He put a laptop on the table. She could not hear what he said. She could see Stone's face, and Stone's face was doing the fully controlled thing that meant something was deeply wrong. Cole came in from the side door. 5 minutes later, he had been outside and read the room in approximately 3 seconds and moved to a position near the bar without going to Stone, which was the right instinct and confirmed for her that Cole's situational awareness was as good as she'd thought. She caught his eye. He gave a minimal shake of his head. "Not yet." She kept working. 12 minutes later, Stone called her name. She came around from behind the bar and walked to Stone's table. Nolan was sitting across from him with the laptop open, and on the screen was security footage. She looked at the footage. She looked at what the footage showed. It showed her entering Stone's office at 1:14 in the morning, 4 days ago. She was carrying a folder. She was in the office for 11 minutes. She left with the folder. She recognized the night. She had gone into the office at 1:14 in the morning to find the tax filings from that she needed to cross-reference. Stone had given her the password. She had told Cole she was doing it before she went in. What the footage did not show was any of that context. What it showed was a woman entering the private office of a man who had not publicly given her access to it, with a folder, late at night, alone. "That's your bookkeeper," Nolan said. He wasn't looking at Haley. He was looking at Stone with the expression of a man being extraordinarily reasonable about a painful situation. "I pulled it this morning when I noticed some irregularities in the way the recent records have been organized. Someone has been in the financial files. I didn't want to believe it was her, but the timestamp doesn't lie." Stone looked at Haley. "You gave me the access," she said. "I know I did," Stone said. "There's no footage of that conversation," Nolan said, "because it allegedly happened in the parking lot at 5 in the morning after the fire, when the security system was down. Convenient timing." "It happened," Cole said. He had come to stand at the edge of the table. "I'm sure you believe that," Nolan said. "But what the camera shows is what the camera shows." He closed the laptop. "There's also the matter of who she is." He looked at Haley for the first time. "You lost your last position for financial misconduct. Your employer documented it. You're here, in a bar with open cash and financial records, during a period when money has been going missing for months. He paused. I'm not saying she set the fire. I'm just saying the timing of her arrival and the things that have been happening is a pattern worth looking at. The bar had gone quiet. It happened gradually, the way rooms go quiet when they sense that something important is being decided, conversations dropping off, heads turning, the collective attention of 40 people shifting toward this table in the corner. Haley looked at the faces around the room. Some of them were unreadable. Some of them were doing the mental arithmetic that people do when someone presents them with a story that fits a fear they already had. Several of the men she had spent 2 weeks working, alongside men she had poured drinks for. Men whose tabs she knew, men whose food preferences she had learned by paying attention, were all looking at her with the cautious distance of people who are not sure yet and don't want to be wrong in either direction. That was the part that hurt, not the accusation, the distance. She had been building something here, not a dramatic transformation. Not a movie version of acceptance, but the small real thing of people getting used to her presence and deciding it was all right. And Nolan had just put a question mark over all of it in 12 minutes, because that was what a man with 8 years of practice could do in a room he understood better than she did. Stone looked at her. His face was unreadable. You understand I have to consider this? Yes, she said. You understand it doesn't feel good to me either. I know, she said. Cole was watching her. She could feel it without looking. He wanted to say something. She could feel that too. The particular tension of a man holding himself back from a defense he wants to make. She looked at him once, directly, and gave a minimal shake of her head. He held. She saw how much it cost him. I need 1 hour, she said to Stone. Stone looked at Nolan. Nolan looked back at Stone with the expression of a man who is being so accommodating that his accommodation is itself a kind of pressure. 1 hour, Stone said. She went to the bar laptop. She did not hurry. Hurrying was what people did when they were afraid. And she could not afford for the room to read her as afraid right now, even though the inside of her chest felt like broken glass being shifted. She started with the footage. The timestamp on the file said it had been captured at 1:14 in the morning, 4 days ago. But the metadata on the file, the creation date, the modification date, the encoding information that the file itself contained, regardless of what the visible timestamp showed, told a different story. The file had been modified at 8:47 that morning, more than 7 hours after the footage it allegedly contained. She pulled the original security drive from her pocket, the drive she had grabbed on the night of the fire. Before any of this, before Nolan had any opportunity to touch it, she connected it to the laptop and pulled the corresponding file from the original capture. The file did not show her entering Stone's office at 1:14. It showed a hallway. She was not in it. The footage Nolan had presented was edited, pieced together from separate captures, given a false timestamp, saved as a new file that appeared original, unless you looked at the metadata, which most people never thought to look at because most people didn't know metadata existed. She found the editing software's process log still in the laptop's temporary files. Nolan had edited the footage on the bar's own system, which was either arrogant or careless or both, and it meant the evidence of what done was still sitting in the machine he'd used to do it. She took screenshots. She saved them to the security drive. She printed 2 copies on the bar's small office printer. She had been at it for 42 minutes. She came back to Stone's table and put the printed pages down in front of him. The footage was edited this morning, she said. The metadata shows the modification time. The original file from the security drive, the one I saved on the night of the fire, before the system went down, shows the same time period. I'm not in it. She put the second page down. The editing software left a process log in the bar's temp files. Here's the timestamp for when the edit was made and on which account. She pointed. That's Nolan's login. The room was very quiet. Stone looked at the pages. He looked at them for a long time. Then he looked at Nolan. Nolan's face had done something not broken, not collapsed, but shifted. The way a structure shifts when a load-bearing element is suddenly removed. He was reassembling it in real time, and she watched it happen and watched the reassembly fail. That could have been he started. My former employer, Haley said. Dennis Carver, the man who destroyed my professional reputation and had me blacklisted in my industry. I know about him. I know that you know about him, because the accounting company that managed his fraudulent records is registered to a holding company with Grant Mercer's name on it. She put the third page down. You were placed here. You built this system before you walked through that door, and you have been running it for 8 years. And you used Carver to make sure that if I ever came close to what my sister found, my credibility would already be gone. Complete silence. Then someone in the room said, "His sister?" Haley looked out at the room. 40 men. The ones who had been watching with careful distance were now watching something different. The calculation in their faces had changed direction. Tessa Monroe, she said. She worked here for 7 weeks. She found the same records I found. She was frightened out of this building by a threat to someone she was trying to protect. She looked at Nolan. She's been living under another name for 18 months because she didn't feel safe coming back. Nolan stood up. His chair scraped back too fast. Stone put one hand on the table. He didn't touch Nolan. He didn't need to. Sit down. His voice was the voice he used when he was not making a request. Nolan sat, but sitting was not the same as stopped. She understood that 20 minutes later, when she went to the back to get the rest of the printed documents from the office printer, and the printer was gone. Not damaged, gone. Removed from the desk, the cable left hanging. In the 7 minutes, she had not been watching the back hallway. She came back to the main room. Nolan was still at the table. Stone and Cole were both there. She looked at Cole. "The printer's gone," she said. Cole stood up. "The printed copies," she said quickly. "I have them. They're the only physical copies, but the drive has everything digitally, and the screenshots are—" She stopped. She had left the security drive connected to the laptop. She looked at the bar. The laptop was closed. The drive was not in it. Her stomach went cold. "He has someone else in here," Cole said. He was already scanning the room. Stone was on his feet. "Who just went to the bar," he said to the room. Flat and loud. Silence. Then a man near the back wall said, "Donnie went to get a drink like 10 minutes ago. Haven't seen him since." Cole moved toward the back door. Stone moved with him. Nolan was on his feet, and Haley was the closest person to him, and she watched his eyes go to the front door. "Nolan," she said. He looked at her. "Don't," she said. He ran for the front door. 2 men who had been standing near it put themselves in the way without being asked, which spoke to something about the room's overall red of the situation that Haley noted and was grateful for. Nolan stopped. He turned. He looked at the room, at 40 men who had trusted him for 8 years and who were now wearing a different expression entirely. And something in him seemed to understand that this calculation had finally run out. He looked at Haley. "You have no idea," he said, "what he will do to you." "Tell me," she said. "Mercer doesn't go to jail," Nolan said. "He's not built that way. He buries people. He buried your sister. He buried you before you even got here. He'll bury this whole place and everyone in it, and he'll do it through lawyers and county filings and code inspections and liquor license challenges until there's nothing left, and you'll never be able to prove he touched any of it. We already have proof," she said. "Proof isn't enough," Nolan said. "I've watched him make proof disappear for 8 years. So have I," Haley said. "And I'm still here." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his face that she hadn't expected, not remorse exactly, but the exhaustion of a man who has been running a thing long enough that the running itself became the only reality. And the moment of stopping feels less like defeat than like a kind of terrible relief. "The files," he said. "The real ones. The full record of every transfer, every shell company, every payment Mercer made that he didn't make officially." He looked at Stone. "I kept copies. Tessa wasn't the only one who knew what I was doing. Mercer knew it too." "They were insurance." "Where?" Stone said. "Abandoned mine office," Nolan said. 12 miles east on the county road. It's where I went after the fire to make sure they were still there. Tessa's investigation files are there too," everything she compiled before she ran. "You're giving this up," Cole said. Not a question. He was reading Nolan the same way Haley read rooms, checking for the hidden structure. "He's going to cut me loose anyway," Nolan said. "I know too much about his other operations. The only reason I'm still useful is the drive and those files. And now," he looked at Haley. "Now you know where they are." Haley looked at Stone. Stone looked at Cole. "We go tonight," Cole said. She did not ask Stone for permission for the next part. She wrote the location in the bar's ledger, the mine office address, her own name below it, the time in the particular notational style she had developed in the past 2 weeks that looked like ordinary inventory shorthand to anyone who hadn't learned to read it. It was a code only Cole would recognize, and she placed it there not because she was afraid she wouldn't come back, but because she had learned from Tessa that the worst thing you could do was be the only person who knew where the evidence was. Nolan told Stone the route. He told it in front of a room of 40 people, which was either courage or the absence of anything left to lose. And when he was done, he sat back in his chair and looked at his hands with the expression of a man who has put down something very heavy for the last time. Cole drove. Stone had the detail organized inside 10 minutes, 4 bikes following at distance. No lights. The kind of coordinated movement that happens when people have practiced working together under pressure for a long time. They didn't go in loud and they didn't go in fast because Haley had asked specifically for quiet. She wanted what was in the mine office, not a confrontation, and a confrontation before they had the files in their hands would give Mercer exactly the narrative he needed. She rode with Cole. He didn't talk on the way out and she didn't need him to. The highway was empty at this hour, and the desert was dark and still, and she sat with the weight of the ledger in her bag and the weight of the past 12 days in her chest, and she let the motion of the truck do the thing motion sometimes does for a mind that has been working too hard, push everything to a flat, purposeful surface where the next step is the only thing that exists. "You wrote something in the ledger before we left," Cole said. "Yes," she said. "The location, and the time, and my name. You were worried you might not come back." "I was worried the information might not make it back," she said. "Me coming back is a different priority." He was quiet for a moment. "Not to me," he said. She looked at him in the dark of the truck cab. He was watching the road. His hands on the wheel were steady. "Cole," she said. "I know," he said. "Later," she agreed. The mine office was unlocked, which was either carelessness or a sign that whoever had last been here had left in a hurry. She went in first, with a flashlight Cole handed her without a word. The room held years of accumulated administrative debris, old filing systems, survey maps pinned to a board that had warped and buckled over time, metal shelves holding binders with dates going back decades. She found Tessa's files in 12 minutes. She knew them by the handwriting on the tabs, that same fast slant script she had been reading since she was 6 years old. The crossbars on the T's too aggressive, the spacing between words larger than average. The handwriting of someone who wrote fast because her thoughts outran her pen. 5 folders, each one dense with printed records, handwritten notes in the margins, sticky tabs marking specific pages. Tessa had been thorough. More than thorough, she had been methodical in a way that suggested she knew she might not be the one presenting this evidence. She had organized it for whoever came after her. She had organized it for Haley, specifically. There was a sticky note on the front of the first folder in Tessa's handwriting. "If you're reading this, you came. I knew you would. I'm sorry it took me so long to trust that you'd be safe. Start with folder 3. Haley held the folder. She breathed. She did not cry. She would cry later, when this was done, when there was space for it. Right now, she put the note in her jacket pocket against her chest and opened folder 3. Folder 3 was the banking records. The complete ones, not the partial picture she'd been reconstructing from the vendor invoices and the shell company filings, but the full ledger of Mercer's money movement through this operation over 3 years. Transfers, receiving accounts, disbursement records, and at the back of the folder, paper clipped together, printed confirmations of wire transfers to an offshore account that connected directly to Mercer's personal holdings. This was not a business dispute. This was a federal case. She was still reading when she heard it. The sound of a vehicle outside, arriving fast, not the measured approach of Cole's backup. A door, steps, and then the door of the mine office opening behind her, and a voice she had not heard before, not Mercer, not anyone she knew saying her name. She turned. There were two men. Neither of them was Nolan. Neither of them was affiliated with the Hells Angels. They had the specific look of people employed to solve problems without asking about the details of the problems. Mr. Mercer would like those files. The first one said. Haley looked at them. She looked at the files in her hands. She looked at the door behind them, which was the only exit. She thought about what Tessa had done when she was frightened. And then she did the opposite. She pressed the emergency alarm panel on the wall beside the filing cabinet, the old mine safety alarm, the one on the survey map that Tessa had marked with a star and a note that said, "This still works," tested it with her full palm, flat, without hesitation. The sound that came out of it was enormous, industrial, designed to be heard across a half-mile of tunnels in an active mine operation. In the confusion, both men flinching, covering their ears, the shock of something that loud in an enclosed space doing to the body what loud, unexpected things always do. She moved, not toward the door, toward the back wall where the survey map showed a maintenance passage that connected the administrative building to the mine's secondary exit point. She had read that map in 45 seconds when she entered the room. She had found the passage. She had measured the distance with her eyes. The passage door was bolted from the inside, and the bolt was old and stiff, and she hit it with her shoulder twice before it gave, and then she was through it, the files held against her chest with both arms, moving in the dark by memory and by the faint light of her phone screen held in her teeth. She came out on the east side of the structure. Cole was there. He was standing 10 feet from the exit, and when she came through the door, he moved toward her immediately. And for 1 second, just one, she let herself lean into the arm he put around her shoulders, the solid realness of him, the fact of his presence. Then she straightened. She held up the files. "I have everything," she said. Cole looked at the files. He looked at her face. He exhaled one controlled breath that told her more than a full sentence would have about what the last 12 minutes had cost him. "The two men inside," she said. "Handled," he said. "Stone's people. Nolan's insurance files? Also found. We have everything." She looked at the sky over the desert, the particular darkness that comes just before the hour when darkness starts to concede. She thought about Tessa organizing these files for her. She thought about 18 months of her sister living under another name, in another town, afraid to come home because she was protecting Haley from a danger Haley had driven straight toward anyway. She thought about what she was going to say when she finally heard Tessa's voice. "Cole," she said. "Yeah. After this is done." She stopped. Started again. "After this is done, there's going to be a lot of things I need to figure out. About staying here. About what comes next. About other things." Cole looked at her. In the dark, his expression was careful and open at the same time. "I know," he said. "I just wanted to say that out loud," she said. "While it's still tonight." He nodded once. "It's still tonight," he said. She held the files tighter against her chest, Tessa's handwriting on the tabs. 5 folders of truth that had been waiting 18 months for someone to carry them out of the dark. And she walked toward the waiting headlights of the truck. Behind them, the emergency alarm was still sounding across the empty desert. Mercer would hear about this before morning. Let him. The authorities arrested Nolan Price at 6:14 in the morning in the parking lot of the last mile, while the emergency alarm at the mine was still echoing in Haley's memory, and the files were locked in Stone's office, safe with Cole sitting outside it in a chair like had decided that was where he was going to be until someone told him a specific reason to be somewhere else. She watched the arrest from the upstairs apartment window, not because she wanted to see it, because she needed to confirm it was real. Nolan walked to the patrol car without being forced. That surprised her. She had expected resistance, the last performance of a man who had been performing for 8 years, but he walked with the particular deflated steadiness of someone who has been carrying something too heavy for too long and has finally been relieved of it, whether they asked to be or not. The deputy held the door. Nolan folded himself into the back seat. The car pulled out of the lot. Haley sat on the edge of the mattress for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called the number she had been given by a contact she trusted, a woman who worked with a legal advocacy organization 2 states over. Someone who knew how to reach people living under assumed names without triggering the fear that a direct approach would create. She left a message. She kept it short because Tessa would understand short. "It's me," she said. "It's done. Come home." She set the phone down. She did not know how long it would take. She did not know what condition her sister would be, and what 18 months of hiding did to a person's sense of what was safe, what was real, what was worth trusting again. She knew from her own last 3 months that fear was not a thing you could simply put down when the immediate danger passed. Fear had a lag. It stayed in the body after the mind understood it was over. She also knew that Tessa was tougher than fear. She always had been. She went downstairs and made coffee and sat at the bar with the files spread out in front of her and began building the formal summary that the state investigators would need: clean, organized, cross-referenced, every piece of evidence connected to every other piece with a citation trail that would hold under scrutiny. She worked for 6 hours without stopping. Cole brought her food at noon without being asked and sat beside her without comment and went back to whatever he was doing. She ate without looking up. At 2 in the afternoon, Stone came and sat across from her. He put his hands on the bar and looked at the organized documents for a moment. "State investigators confirmed," he said. "They're sending someone tomorrow. FBI has been notified about the wire transfers and the offshore account." "Mercer," she said. "Not arrested yet," Stone said. She looked up. "He won't stay quiet." "No," Stone said. "He won't. He's going to come at this legally," she said. "He's going to challenge the evidence chain, dispute the provenance of the files from the mine, and he's going to use the club's reputation as a weapon. He'll tell a story about bikers manufacturing evidence against an upstanding developer, and he'll find people willing to listen to it." Stone was quiet for a moment. "You've been thinking about this since the mine." "I've been thinking about it since the first night," she said. "When Mercer walked into this bar and threatened you in front of 40 people and called it an offer." She straightened the papers in front of her. "He's not afraid of evidence. He's beaten evidence before. What he's afraid of is public accountability, people seeing who he is before his lawyers can control the narrative." "There's a county public hearing," Stone said. "Town council scheduled it for next week. Mercer requested it. Property acquisition, zoning for the highway distribution center. He was planning to use it to push the final legal paperwork through." He paused. "He still thinks he's going to that hearing with the advantage." "Good," Haley said. "Let him think that." Tessa called 3 days later. Haley was behind the bar during the late afternoon lull when her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she looked at the screen and saw a number she didn't recognize with an Arizona area code. And she knew before she answered. She walked to the back hallway. She answered. "Hey," Tessa said. The word was small and ordinary, and it hit Haley somewhere so specific and undefended that she had to put her hand against the wall. "Hey," she said back. Silence for a moment, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that happens between two people who have so much to say that the words have to sort themselves out before they can start. "You found the files," Tessa said. "I found the files," Haley said. "Folder 3 first, like you said. You always were better at following instructions than me." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay. Are you?" "I've been better," Tessa said. "I've been a lot worse lately." Her voice was careful. "Feeling its way along. I wanted to call you every day for 18 months. You know that, right?" "I know," Haley said. "I know you did." She stopped. "Tessa, I need to say something, and I need you to let me say it without arguing." "All right. What you did scared me more than anything Mercer did," Haley said. "You disappearing, not knowing if you were alive or hurt or running," or she stopped. Restarted. "The postcard helped. It helped that you sent it. But 18 months of not knowing where you were, that's a damage that doesn't just disappear. Because the reason for that to be something I understand. Silence. I know, Tessa said. Her voice was quieter. I know it is. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty, Haley said. I'm saying it because I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. I don't want us to do that thing where we skip over the hard part because we're so relieved the hard part is over. We never were good at skipping over things, Tessa said. No, Haley said. We're not. Another silence, and this one had texture, the specific texture of two sisters who have been in the same family long enough to know what the other one is doing, even on the phone in different states. I'm coming home, Tessa said. I know. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't know if I can walk back into that bar while she stopped. I've been having a hard time with rooms lately. Rooms I haven't checked myself. That makes sense, Haley said. Take the time you need to get here. I'll still be here. You're staying? Haley thought about the question. She thought about the upstairs apartment with the mattress she had finally put sheets on. She thought about Amos and his reorganized inventory and his old man's directness. She thought about Gerald Broom and the 4 other veterans who had written down their names and their donation amounts with the particular dignity of people finally being taken seriously. She thought about Cole, sitting outside the safe in a chair until morning, because he had decided that was where he needed to be. I'm staying, she said. The night before the public hearing, Mercer moved. He moved through a law firm, 3 attorneys, a formal letter delivered to the county administrator and copied to the Red Mesa sheriff, the state liquor control board, and 2 local news outlets. The letter claimed that evidence presented by the Last Mile's new bookkeeper had been manufactured, that the chain of custody for documents retrieved from private property was legally compromised, and that the individual, known as Haley Monroe, had a documented history of financial misconduct at her previous place of employment that rendered her an unreliable witness in any proceeding. Stone called her into the office when the letter arrived. He handed it to her without comment. She read it once, straight through. Then she set it on the desk. He got ahead of us, she said. He's been preparing this since the mine, Stone said. He knew the arrest was coming. This is the counter move. He can't undo the evidence, she said. The bank records, the wire transfers, the shell company documentation, that's federal territory. His lawyers can't touch it. He doesn't need to undo it, Stone said. He needs to create enough doubt that the public hearing goes his way. The town council approves the zoning, and the property acquisition moves forward before the federal case is resolved. By the time the courts finish with the fraud, he'll already have the land. He'll pay a fine and walk. Haley looked at the letter. She looked at her name in the 3rd paragraph. The words documented history of financial misconduct in the clean formal language of legal correspondence. And she felt the specific anger of someone who has seen their life misrepresented so many times. The Times have gotten very good at identifying exactly which words are doing the damage. He's counting on this town, looking at that letter and looking at those jackets, she said, pointing at the window toward the parking lot and deciding that the developer in the suit is more credible than anything coming from inside this bar. He's been counting on that for years, Stone said. She folded the letter and handed it back to him. Then we go to the hearing, she said. All of us, and we make sure he has to say it to our faces. Tessa arrived the following morning at 11. She pulled into the parking lot in a car that was not hers borrowed. Haley would learn later from the woman who had sheltered her for the last 6 months in Tucson, and she sat in it for 2 minutes before she got out. Haley knew because she was watching from the window. When Tessa finally came through the door of the Last Mile, she looked like herself, and she looked like someone who had been through something that left marks in places that didn't show in photographs. She was thinner. She held herself differently, not broken, but careful. The way a person carries themselves when they have learned to be aware of where all the exits are. She looked at Haley across the bar. Haley came around from behind it. They met in the middle of the room, and they held on to each other for a long time without either of them speaking. And around them, the bar was mostly empty at that hour. Just Amos at his usual spot, pretending to study the label on his bottle, and Cole near the door, giving them the space that only someone who understood the weight of a reunion like this would know to give. When they finally separated, Tessa looked at her sister's face with the searching expression of a woman checking for damage. "You look terrible," Tessa said. "I haven't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in 2 weeks," Haley said. "You look like you belong here," Tessa said. And then, more quietly, "I used to look like that." "You will again," Haley said. Tessa looked around the bar, the rebuilt back hallway, the reorganized inventory, the ledger open on the counter in Haley's handwriting. She looked at it for a long moment. "You fixed it," she said. "We fixed it," Haley said. "But I need you tonight. The hearing is at 7. Tessa looked at her. "I know," she said. "That's why I drove through the night." The public hearing was held in the Red Mesa County building, a room that seated approximately 200 people and had approximately 260 people in it by 6:50, with more standing in the hallway outside the open doors. Haley had not expected that. She had expected the regulars, the town council, the people who followed local zoning disputes, because they had specific stakes. She had not expected the room to be full in the way that rooms are full when a community has decided something is important enough to show up for, even if they don't fully understand all the details yet. She recognized faces. Gerald Broom in the third row, with 2 other veterans she'd taken statements from. Pauline from the motel, sitting with the woman who ran the hardware store. Several of the business owners from the main street who had nodded to her in the weeks since the fire with the cautious acknowledgement of people reserving judgment. A local reporter she had spoken with twice, not to give information but to answer basic questions about the timeline of events. She sat in the front row with Tessa on one side and Cole on the other. Stone sat directly behind her. The rest of the room held a number of men in leather cuts that represented, she calculated, every member of the local Hells Angels chapter, and then some riders who had come from other chapters when Stone put the word out, not to intimidate but to be present, which was its own form of statement. Grant Mercer was at a table on the right side of the room with his 3 attorneys, and a property consultant, and an architectural rendering of the Highway Distribution Center displayed on an easel beside him. He looked like what he was, a man who owned the kind of confidence that was purchased rather than earned, and who had walked into enough rooms like this one to believe the walk itself was most of the battle. He looked at Haley when she sat down. She looked back at him. She did not look away first. The council chair opened the proceedings. Mercer's team presented, first, a polished 20-minute presentation about economic development, job creation, infrastructure improvement, the highway distribution center that would bring revenue to a town that needed it. It was professional and detailed and contained within its careful language. The suggestion that the opposition to this development came from criminal elements whose interests were served by keeping the land inaccessible. The chair invited responses. Haley stood up. She had not prepared a speech. She had prepared evidence, which was different. She walked to the front of the room with a folder and a calm that she had been building towards since the night she walked into the last mile for the first time and chose not to turn around. She started with the vendors. She put the invoices on the council table copies, originals held separately, and explained what they showed in language that required no financial background to understand. False deliveries, real charges, money moved to shell companies. She put the shell company registrations beside the invoices. She put the wire transfer records beside those. She named the holding company. She named Grant Mercer. One of Mercer's attorneys stood up. These documents were obtained from private property under circumstances that the documents were found on property belonging to an abandoned mine operation. Haley said, by the owner of the bar, that is the subject of this hearing, accompanied by witnesses, in the course of investigating a fire that state investigators have confirmed was deliberately set. She looked at the attorney. The chain of custody has been provided to state investigators, to the FBI Financial Crimes Division, and to the County District Attorney's Office. If you'd like to raise a legal objection, I'd suggest raising it there. The attorney sat down. She turned back to the counsel. I want to talk about the Veterans Fund, she said. She put Gerald Broom's statement on the table. Then the other four. 5 names, 5 dates, 5 specific amounts donated to a charitable fund that was supposed to support injured riders and local veterans in need, and 5 confirmations that the money never arrived. Gerald Broom donated $320, she said. His neighbor's son needed medical transport after an accident, and Gerald gave what he could. The money was logged, recorded, and redirected. She looked at Gerald in the 3rd row. He met her eyes and held them. Gerald is 68 years old. He served in the Army for 22 years. He donated that money because he believed in what this community said it stood for. He is owed an apology and a reimbursement, and the knowledge that what was taken from him was wrong. Not as an accounting error, not as a business dispute, as a theft from a man who had already given enough. The room was very quiet. Mr. Mercer has presented tonight the argument that the opposition to his development comes from elements of this community who are not trustworthy, that because of who they are, what they wear, what their organization is, you should weigh their credibility against his accordingly. She looked at the council members one by one. That calculation depends on this town, fearing their jackets more than questioning his suit. She heard the room shift, not a sound exactly, but a change in the quality of the silence. The way a room changes when something that everyone has been thinking gets said out loud by someone with enough evidence to. I came to Red Mesa 11 days ago with $86 and a suitcase and a job nobody else would take, she said. I came because my sister sent me a postcard 18 months ago, and in 6 words, she told me where to look and who to ask. She looked at the same records I looked at, and she found the same things I found. She had to disappear to stay safe. She is in this room tonight. She didn't look at Tessa. She didn't need to. She came back because the people she was protecting finally had what they needed to protect themselves. She put the last document on the table. This is the accounting company registration that connects Dennis Carver, my former employer, the man who destroyed my professional reputation, to a holding company with Grant Mercer's name on it. My credibility was targeted before I arrived because someone knew I was the kind of person who read numbers carefully and didn't sign things that were wrong. That doesn't disqualify my testimony. It confirms it. She closed the folder. She walked back to her seat. The room held its breath for a moment. Then Gerald Broom stood up. He was not a man who spoke publicly. Often she could tell by the way he held himself. The particular stiffness of someone doing something unfamiliar because it needed to be done, and he said, simply, everything she said about my donation is true. I want the council to know that. He sat down. A woman 2 rows behind him stood up next. She ran the hardware store. I have been watching what that bar contributes to this community for 12 years, she said. I have watched men from that club bring food to people during the winter when the county couldn't get supply routes running. I have watched them fix roofs for elderly residents who couldn't pay anyone. I have never watched Grant Mercer do anything for this town that didn't also have a price tag for him somewhere. She sat down. Mercer's attorney was on his feet. The council chair was managing the room. 3 more people stood up before order was restored, each one adding something specific, a date, an amount, a thing that had been done by the community that the last mile represented that was not in any grant application or press release because it had simply been done because someone needed it done. Mercer leaned toward his lead attorney. Haley could see his jaw working. She watched him understand that the room had turned in a direction that his money and his lawyers couldn't redirect in the time available to him. The council voted at 9:17. The zoning application was denied. The property acquisition request was tabled pending the outcome of the state and federal investigations. One council member, the youngest, looked directly at Mercer when she cast her vote and held his eyes through it. Mercer stood up. His attorneys were packing their materials. He looked at Haley across the room with the expression of a man who has lost a battle and is already calculating the next one. She looked back at him. She did not offer anything. Her face had not already decided to give. He walked out. The state investigators froze Mercer Land Holdings assets 48 hours later. It was not an arrest. His attorneys were already managing that process. And the legal path from frozen assets to criminal charges was long and full of the kind of friction that wealth purchased. Stone told her the news at the bar, and she nodded and felt the complicated thing that justice in the real world always felt like not the clean satisfaction of a story that ended at the right moment, but the ongoing unfinished work of accountability that continued past the moment everyone wanted to call the ending. "He'll fight it," she said. "He'll fight it," Stone confirmed. "But he'll fight it without the land, without the accounts, and without Nolan's cooperation." He paused. His own accountant gave a statement to investigators this morning. Apparently, Mercer hadn't paid him in 6 weeks, and the loyalty dried up accordingly. She almost laughed. "How very human of him," she said. Stone looked at her for a moment. He had the expression he sometimes got when he was about to say something that he had been holding for a while. "I need to make a decision about the bar," he said. "The manager position. Nolan's gone. The accounts are a mess. I need someone who—" "I know," she said. "The job is yours if you want it." She looked at him. She looked at the bar, the rebuilt back hallway, the reorganized shelves, the ledger open on the counter. She thought about what she would need, not what she would accept. What she would need, specifically, for this to be right. Written employment terms, she said. Wages documented and consistent. Full access to all business accounts. No restricted category exceptions for financial records. Independent accounting review quarterly. Legal employment status for every person on the payroll. Stone looked at her without surprise. "That's a longer list than most people would give me." "I know," she said. "It's still the list." He extended his hand. "Done," he said. She shook it. Tessa was still in the upstairs apartment when Haley came back that night. She had taken the second bedroom smaller, with a window that faced east, which she had always preferred because she was the sister who woke up early and wanted the morning to have somewhere to arrive. Haley knocked once and went in. Tessa was sitting on the bed with one of the folders from the mine in her lap, not reading it, just holding it. The way people hold things that represent a long passage of difficulty that is now, somehow, behind them. "How do you feel?" Haley said. "Tired," Tessa said. "Good tired, I think. The kind you can sleep off." Haley sat on the floor across from her, back against the wall, the way they had sat in their childhood bedroom at the end of hard days when the floor felt more honest than the furniture. "I need to ask you something," Tessa said. "Ask. Did you come here for me or for the job?" Haley thought about it. Not performing thought, actually doing it, the same way she had always done it with Tessa, who could tell the difference. "I came for you," she said. "And I stayed for the job. And then I stayed for something else." She paused. "I think I stayed because it turned out to be a place where doing the right thing was possible, even when it was hard, even when nobody was watching." She looked at her sister. "That's harder to find than people think." Tessa looked at her for a moment. "The job," she said. "Stone's offering it?" "He offered it tonight." "And Cole?" Haley looked at the window. "What about Cole, Haley?" "We'll figure that out," Haley said. "At a pace that makes sense." "He drove through the night to a mine when he thought you might be in danger," Tessa said. "He did," Haley said. "That's a man who has already figured out something that you're still treating as a future question." Haley considered that. She didn't argue with it, because it was accurate. And arguing with Tessa when she was accurate had never once been worth the energy. "He told me he cares about me," Haley said. "He told me without making it into a condition, without asking me to stay for him or arranging things so that leaving would be harder." She paused. "I've had people tell me they cared about me and mean by it that I owed them something afterward. He didn't do that." "No," Tessa agreed. "You knew him," Haley said. It was not a question, she could tell from the tone. "Not the way you do," Tessa said. "But enough. He was the only one, after I left, the only one who kept asking Stone if anyone had tried to find me." She stopped. "He asked every month for a year." Haley sat with that for a moment. Then she got up off the floor. She was tired in the way Tessa had described the good kind, the kind that meant the body understood the thing was done and was beginning to let go of the tension it had been carrying for 11 days. She put her hand on her sister's shoulder briefly, just briefly the way their mother had done when words were finished. "Get some sleep," she said. "You too," Tessa said. She went to the door. Then she stopped. "Tessa," she said. "Yeah, I'm glad you sent the postcard." Tessa was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you drove," she said. Haley went back to her own room and sat on the edge of the mattress with the window open and the desert night coming in and the bar below her quiet and present and real. And she let herself feel, finally, what she had been managing away from for 11 days, the fear that had passed, the truth that had been found, the sister who was home, the work that was done. Not all the work. Mercer was still out there, his lawyers working, his money still fighting what couldn't be fought forever but could be slowed considerably. The federal case would take time. The accountability would be partial and imperfect and arrive in increments rather than all at once, which was how real accountability almost always arrived. But she was here, and she knew what she was doing. And in the morning, there would be a bar to open and a ledger to update. And Gerald Broom had told her he was going to come by this week, because some of the other veterans wanted to talk about what came next, what the fund could become if it was run cleanly, what it could do for people who needed it. She thought about that. She thought about what she knew about money, about systems, about what happened when you built something with transparency rather than against it. She thought about coal. She lay back on the mattress and closed her eyes and let herself, for the first time in a very long time, stop solving problems that didn't need solving right now. Outside, somewhere in the parking lot, a motorcycle started up and idled for a moment and then went quiet again. The bar was still standing, so was she. The first thing Haley did on her first official morning as manager of the last mile was fire the accounting software. Not dramatically, she didn't make a speech about it. She simply uninstalled the program Nolan had been using, the one with the backdoor access and the version history that had been quietly altered 18 times over 3 years. And she replaced it with a clean system that logged every entry with a timestamp and a user ID that could not be modified after the fact. She set it up before the bar opened. She tested it twice. She printed the access credentials and gave one copy to Stone and put the other in the safe with the financial records. Stone stood behind her while she worked and didn't say a word, which was the version of approval she had come to recognize from him, the presence without interference that meant he trusted what she was doing. "This system sends a weekly report to an independent accountant," she said. "Someone outside the club, outside Red Mesa, someone with no stake in the outcome. Every quarter they audit. That's going to cost money," Stone said. "Less than another Nolan," she said. He said nothing for a moment. "Then set it up," she set it up. By the time the bar opened at 11, she had also drafted the new employment terms for the 4 people on the regular payroll written, signed, specifying hours and wages and overtime and the process for raising concerns. She set them on the bar one at a time as each person arrived for their shift. Each one read it. Each one signed. The bartender who came on at noon, a quiet man named Ray, who had been working cash in hand for 3 years, signed his copy and then sat for a moment looking at it the way people look at things that make official what they had stopped expecting. "This is real," he said. "It's real," she said. He folded it carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. He went behind the bar and started his setup without another word. But he moved differently for the rest of the day, with the particular quiet ease of a man who has been given back something he forgot he was owed. Tessa started working 3 days after she arrived, not at the bar, but at the table in the corner that Haley had claimed as the unofficial office for what they were building together. She had always been the organizational one, the sister who could take a pile of connected problems and map them into a structure that held, the way architects thought, always finding the load-bearing element first. She brought that to the work now, sitting across from Haley, with a yellow pad and a laptop borrowed from Stone, building the framework of what they were calling, for the moment, simply the fund. "It can't just be transportation," Tessa said on the third morning. Transportation gets people out of the immediate situation. It doesn't give them anything to land on. What do we have to offer? Haley said. Temporary work, Tessa said. You need people here. You know people in town who need reliable, short-term help. If we formalize the connection match people to opportunities, give them 2 to 4 weeks of documented employment they can use as a reference. That's what I needed, Haley said. When Carver destroyed my record, one person willing to give me a documented week of real work. Yes, Tessa said. They looked at each other. Legal referrals, Haley said. Not lawyers we pay for a directory of legal aid organizations. Pro bono services, people who specialize in wage theft and employment retaliation. I know someone in Phoenix, Tessa said. She helped me while I was under. She'd be willing to be listed. Then we list her, Haley said. They kept going. By the end of the morning, they had a framework, not a charity, not a rescue operation, but a practical network of resources organized around a single premise. Adults escaping coercive situations need tools, not rescue. They needed the specific, practical things that made autonomous decision-making possible. Everything else came from the person themselves when they had what they needed to choose. They named it the Open Road Fund because Tessa suggested it and Haley liked it, and because both of them understood, without discussing it, that a road was not a destination, it was the conditioning in motion when motion was the most important thing. Cole announced the apprenticeship on a Tuesday at the bar's weekly meeting, a loose, informal gathering of club members that Haley had been attending for 3 weeks, and that was now, gradually, also including non-members who had a stake in the bar's operations. It was becoming, slowly and without announcement, something that functioned like a community meeting as much as a club meeting, and nobody seemed to object to this. He stood up and said, in the direct way he said most things, that he was starting a motorcycle repair program for veterans and unemployed adults in the area. 6 weeks, twice a week, at the shop behind the bar that the club had never fully used for anything but storage. He had already lined up a contact at the VA who would provide referrals. He needed 3 volunteers to help teach. 4 hands went up immediately. Amos raised his hand last slowly, and when Cole looked at him, he said, I'm not volunteering to teach. I'm signing up as a student. I've been riding for 40 years and I still don't know how to fix the damn things. The room laughed. It was the particular laughter of people who are comfortable enough with each other to find each other funny. Haley watched Cole stand at the front of the room, accepting the logistics of what he'd just made real. And she thought about what it had taken him to get here, the Army contractor he hadn't pushed hard enough on, the friend who paid the price, the decade of watching carefully and trusting slowly and building toward the moment when trusting would be worth the risk again. He had built toward this without calling it building. He had just kept showing up. That was, she thought, the most honest form of courage she knew how to name. After the meeting, when most people had filtered out, Cole came to the bar and sat where he always sat, the last stool on the right, the one with the sight line to both the front and back doors, the one he had been occupying since before she arrived. She poured him his usual without being asked. The apprenticeship, she said. You didn't tell me you were announcing it today. I didn't decide until this morning, he said. What made you decide? He thought about it. Gerald Broom came by the shop yesterday to ask if I could look at his truck. His son had been trying to fix it and made it worse. We spent 2 hours on it. He turned his glass. Gerald told me his son had been out of work for 8 months, that he was 24 and had tried 4 different applications at the distribution center site before it got shut down, and now he didn't know where to look. He paused. I can teach the son to fix engines. That's a thing I can actually do. So I decided to do it. She looked at him for a moment. Cole. Yeah, you're a good man, she said. I don't say that the way people say it when they mean someone is harmless. I mean it the way it's supposed to mean something. He looked at her. He held it for a moment, the specific quality of stillness that meant he was receiving something without deflecting it, which was hard for him in a way she understood from the inside. I know, he said, thank you. She nodded. She went back to work. And the thing between them, the real thing, the one that had been building, from the first night when he was watching her from the end of the bar, and she knew and didn't mind, continued in the way that real things continue. Not with declarations, but with the accumulated weight of mornings and late nights and honest conversations, and the choosing, over and over, to be present with each other without conditions attached. Mercer's first legal challenge arrived 6 weeks after the hearing. It came through the county court system, a motion to suppress the mine office documents on the grounds of unlawful entry, filed by his lead attorney with the professional efficiency of someone who had been preparing it since the night of the arrest. Haley read the filing at the bar that morning with the specific cold focus she brought to things that required it, and when she finished, she called the legal advocacy contact in Phoenix, the one Tessa had given her, and described the motion in detail. "It's a standard suppression argument," the attorney said. "They're not wrong that the chain of custody is arguable. It depends on how the access is characterized and who was present. Stone was present," Haley said. "It's his property company as adjacent landowner. Cole was there. I was there. Did anyone object to the entry at the time? The 2 men Mercer sent were there to take the files by force," she said. "One of them is in the county's custody for assault." A pause on the phone. "That changes the characterization substantially," the attorney said. "If Mercer's own agents were present and hostile, the entry wasn't unlawful, it was responsive. Get me the witness statements from that night, and I'll give you a written assessment by Friday." She got the statements. She sent them. The attorney's assessment arrived Thursday, and it was clear the suppression motion was weak, dependent on a version of events that the assault charge directly contradicted. The documents would hold. She printed the assessment and put it in Stone's hands at noon. He read it. He looked up. "How'd you know who to call?" "Tessa," she said. "Tessa knew who to call. I'm learning the network." He handed the assessment back to her. "Keep learning it," he said. She kept learning it. The first community dinner happened on a Sunday evening, 5 weeks after Haley took the manager position, and it was not planned so much as it accumulated. Gerald Broom asked if the bar would consider hosting a veterans gathering, and Haley said yes, and Amos said he would cook if someone bought the groceries, and 3 women from the local VFW auxiliary arrived the afternoon of with folding tables they'd borrowed from that suggested they organized competence. They'd been waiting for someone to say yes for a long time. 60 people came to the first dinner. Some of them had never been inside the last mile before. Some of them had driven past it for years with the specific deliberate non-looking that people do when they have decided something is not for them. They came because Gerald had called them, or because they'd heard about it from someone who had heard about it from someone else. And they sat at the long tables that Amos had set up, and they ate the food that Amos cooked, which was extraordinary in the way that food made by someone who has been cooking the same dishes for 50 years is extraordinary, not complex. Just exactly right. And they talked to each other and to the Hells Angels who were also there, not performing accommodation, but simply present, eating the same food, having the conversations that 2 groups of people when they are placed in the same room and fed well and given time. Haley moved through the room all evening, refilling glasses, checking in with the kitchen, watching the temperature of the space the way she had watched rooms for years. She caught Tessa's eye across the room. At one point, Tessa was sitting between Gerald's wife and a young man Haley didn't recognize, deep in a conversation that had the intensity of something being worked out rather than just discussed. And Tessa gave her the look they had been giving each other since childhood. The small private communication that meant this is the thing. This is what we were supposed to do. Haley looked back at her sister and let herself. For one moment in the middle of a room full of people she had not known 2 months ago, and now could not imagine not knowing. Feel the full weight of what had been built, not by her alone. That was the part she had to keep reminding herself. Not by her alone. The second legal challenge arrived 8 weeks after the first. This one was more serious, a civil suit filed by Mercer's attorneys against Stone personally, claiming defamation and interference with business operations based on statements made at the public hearing. The suit named Haley as a co-defendant, which was the particular move of a man who wanted to make the cost of fighting him as wide and personal as possible. Stone told her at the bar on a Wednesday morning with the flat voice he used when something was genuinely costly, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. She looked at the filing. She read it twice. He's going after individuals because going after the evidence isn't working, she said. Yes, Stone said. This is expensive, she said. Even if we win, he said. The Legal Advocacy Network, she said. Already called them, Stone said. They're taking it pro bono. The civil suit is relevant to their larger case against Mercer's pattern of retaliatory litigation. Apparently, we're not the first people he's done this to. Haley looked up. Who else? 3 other property cases in the past 6 years, Stone said. Landowners in other counties who refused his acquisitions. 2 of them settled because they couldn't afford not to. 1 fought and won, but it took 4 years. He paused. The legal team wants our documentation. The pattern of retaliatory suits strengthens all the cases collectively. Then we give them everything, she said. I already told them that, Stone said. I told them you'd say that, she looked at him. He had the expression he sometimes got not warm. Because Stone was not a warm man by default, but something adjacent to it. Something that meant he had assessed something and found it sound. Haley, he said, yeah, you came here looking for your sister and a night's wages. He paused. I want you to know I understand what you've given this place. And I want you to know I don't take it for granted. She looked at him for a moment. Stone was a man who did not give compliments carelessly, which meant when he gave one, it landed with the full weight of its scarcity. I know you don't, she said. She went back to work. The federal charges against Grant Mercer were filed 11 weeks after the hearing wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit arson, and 4 counts of theft by deception related to the veteran and charitable fund disbursements. The news came through the legal team first, then through the local paper, then through the particular telephone of small-town information that meant everyone in Red Mesa knew within 4 hours. Haley was behind the bar when she heard. She set down the glass she was drying. She stood still for 10 seconds. Then she picked the glass back up and kept working. Tessa, sitting at the corner table with the Open Road Fund's intake forms, looked at her across the room. You okay? She said. Yes, Haley said. That's it? They filed federal charges against the man who burned down half this bar and destroyed your career and ran me out of town for 18 months. And your yes? Yes, Haley said. Because I knew it was coming and I've been ready for it. And I don't need it to feel like more than it is. She paused. It's accountability. Partial, imperfect, slow. Real accountability. That's what it is. Tessa looked at her for a moment. You've gotten very measured about this. I've gotten very tired of being surprised by the gap between what justice is supposed to look like and what it actually looks like, Haley said. This is what it actually looks like. I'll take it. Tessa nodded slowly. Amos said something to me last week, she said. He said the difference between people who last in hard places and people who burn out is that the ones who last know the difference between winning and not losing. Amos is a very wise man who acts like he's only paying attention to his whiskey, Haley said. He's been doing that for 30 years, Tessa said. It works. The anniversary of the fire fell on a Thursday. Haley knew it was coming and had decided deliberately not to mark it with ceremony. The bar would open at its regular time. She would work her regular shift. The community dinner that had now happened every Sunday for 6 weeks would happen on Sunday as usual. The anniversary was a fact, not a monument. She was wrong about one thing, though. She was wrong about the morning. She came downstairs at 7 to find Cole already in the bar, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that he was not at his regular stool. He was at the back of the room with Amos and 3 other riders and a folding table they had set up, and on the table were coffee and food, and what appeared to be a conversation that had been in progress for some time. She stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked at them. Cole looked up. Morning, he said. What's happening? She said. Breakfast. Amos, sit down. She sat down. Someone put coffee in front of her. The conversation continued not about the fire, not about Mercer or Nolan or the legal cases, about the apprenticeship, which had its first cohort of 7 students about the community dinner and whether they should do it twice monthly now that the attendance had grown. About a family in town that had lost their truck to an emergency repair they couldn't afford and whether the fund had a mechanism to handle that kind of practical need. She sat in the middle of this conversation and drank her coffee and said what she thought when she had something to say, and the morning moved around her with the specific quality of a morning in a place where you belong, not performing, not managing, not holding the whole thing up with your hands, just present. After an hour, when the others had drifted out to start their days, Cole stayed. He sat across from her with his coffee and looked at her in the direct, quiet way that was simply his face when it was not managing anything. "1 year ago, you walked through that door with a broken suitcase," he said. $86, she said. "And no intention of staying longer than a week," he said. "That's what I told myself," she said. He nodded. He turned his cup once. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. She looked at him. She thought about everything the last year had held the fire. The fraud, the files, the hearing, the lawsuit, the fund's first intake, the apprenticeship's first day, the Sunday dinners, the mornings at the bar, reconstructing something that had been built wrong for 8 years and building it right this time. She thought about Tessa sleeping in the next room for 4 months before she found her own apartment in town. The slow repair of the thing between them that was real work rather than sentiment conversations that were sometimes hard, sometimes funny, sometimes both. She thought about Gerald Broom, who had become a regular at the bar, who came in 3 afternoons a week and sat with Amos and had been, by everyone's gradual observation, less tired than he had been when she first met him. She thought about Cole, asking Stone every month for a year whether anyone had tried to find Tessa. "I'm glad I stayed too," she said. "You staying for good?" he said. She considered that the way she considered things that were real and important actually. Fully, without performing uncertainty, she didn't feel or certainty she hadn't earned. "Yes," she said. "I am." He held her eyes for a moment. And then he nodded once, the way he nodded when something had been confirmed that he had believed for a while, and was simply glad to hear said plainly. She was behind the bar at 6 that evening when the front door opened. The bar was at its regular Thursday density, 30 or so people. The particular comfortable noise of a room that has learned to be at ease with itself. The door opened, and the room didn't go quiet the way it had gone quiet a year ago when Haley walked through it for the first time, because it was a regular Thursday and the door opening was a regular thing. But Haley looked up. She looked up because she had learned, over a year of working this bar, to read the door the way she read everything by the quality of the arrival. The thing a person's body said before they said anything themselves. The young woman was maybe 22, 23. She had a bag that was not quite a suitcase smaller. The kind of bag that holds the things a person grabs when they leave fast. She stood in the doorway of the last mile and looked at the room with the specific expression of someone who has used up every other option and has arrived here because here was what was left. Not broken something harder than broken. The particular exhaustion of a person who has been strong for too long without anywhere safe to put it down. She looked at the bar. She looked at the men in leather. She looked at the handwritten sign that Haley had replaced 3 weeks ago when the old one finally gave out same words. New paper. Night bartender wanted cash paid weekly. The room had gone quiet, she realized. Not the way it had gone quiet for Haley not assessing, not wary. Quiet the way rooms go quiet when something recognizable happens. When something comes full circle. Haley set down the glass she was holding. She looked at the young woman's bag. She looked at her face, the set of her jaw, the careful way she was holding herself together, the eyes that were taking inventory of the room and finding it not what she expected, but not leaving. She did not interrogate her. She did not ask where she came from or what had happened or why she was here. She had been asked those questions once. At the beginning of something she had not yet known would save her. And she had understood that the questions were not kindness, they were a gate. And she was not a gate. She reached under the bar. She took out an application, a single page, simple, clear. She put it on the bar. Went to the kitchen and put together a plate of food, nothing elaborate, the same thing she would make for anyone who needed to eat. She came back. She went upstairs and got the spare key off the hook by the kitchen door. The key she had put there 3 months ago because Tessa had told her she should, because you never know who's going to need the room. She put all three things on the bar in front of the young woman. The young woman looked at them. She looked at Haley. "The night shift starts at 8, Haley said. "You can decide the rest in the morning." The young woman looked at the key for a long moment. Something moved through her face, the slow movement of a person who has been holding against a door that is just quietly opened. "Okay," she said. Her voice was small, but it was steady. "Okay." She picked up the key outside. The morning would come, and when it did, the parking lot of the last mile would hold the motorcycles of 40 riders who had been there since before Haley arrived and would be there long after any single story ended. Inside, Tessa was at the corner table with the Open Road Fund's intake forms, her pen moving with the particular focused energy of a woman who had found the work she was built for. Gerald Broom was at his usual afternoon spot with Amos, the two of them in a conversation that had been running for 3 months and showed no signs of concluding. Ray, the bartender, was managing his section with the ease of a man who knew his own hours and his own wages and had been given the simple dignity of a documented job. Cole's apprenticeship students were in the shop behind the bar, working on an engine that had been given up on by 2 mechanics and had not yet been given up on by them. And Haley Monroe stood behind the bar of the establishment that had been feared and misunderstood and deliberately targeted and had survived all three. And she understood, not for the first time, but for the first time with the full weight of a year behind it, what she had actually found when she drove 11 hours with $86 and no plan except a postcard. She had come looking for her sister. She had found her sister and the truth about where her sister had been and the system that had been built to keep both of them quiet. And she had taken that system apart by doing the same thing she had always done, the thing she had done since she was 14, running her mother's household numbers. She had looked at what was in front of her, accurately, and she had refused to sign something that was wrong. That was all it had ever taken. That was, it turned out, everything. She picked up her cloth and she went back to work, in the bar that was hers, now in every way that mattered, not because she owned it, but because she had earned it by showing up when no one expected her to, staying in something easier to leave, and building something real in a place where something false had been for too long. The last mile was still standing, and so was she fully, finally, irreversibly here.